Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a former Boeing 737 and current Airbus A330 pilot, and in today's video I don't want to talk what's in front of us like we usually do in this channel, but I want to talk about what's behind us. And the topic of today's videos is going to be the flight simmer's obsession with circuit breakers. Now, under a lot of my videos I get comments like, why don't the circuit breakers work in the PMDG aircraft? Or complaints that, oh, these things don't even have circuit breakers, they are noob simulations. And, well, I do have a feeling that many flight simmers don't really seem to know what circuit breakers are used for in aviation and how they are really used in aviation. So that is going to be the topic for today's video. Now let me start with my personal experience with circuit breakers while flying the line and while flying in general aviation. In general aviation, I think I've had a circuit breaker trip once on a Cessna 172, and that was when the plane was struck by lightning, and that killed a circuit breaker. Okay, happens. Now, let's talk about the airline industry then, which is where we mostly live in our flight simulation environment. Now, in terms of airlines, let's start with the Boeing 737, and then we will move on to the A330. So, in the Boeing 737 there is basically two circuit breakers that pilots deal with. One of them, if they pull that and the airline knows about it, is going to get them a meeting with the chief pilot. The other one, if they pull that, is also going to get them a meeting with the chief pilot, but for a different reason. So we'll start with the two breakers there are. They are located behind the captain's seat, and there is two of them. The first one is up here, the standby altimeter ASI vibrator. Now, right now we're sitting in a 737 that has the ISFD installed, so the integrated standby flight displays. But if you've got a 737 with the old school standby instruments, then you will be familiar with that clicking sound that you hear all the time. Now, that is the needle of the standby altimeter, which has a little clacker installed in it, which is basically a small device that constantly hits against the needle in order to make it run a little bit more smooth, to make it less sticky. And some pilots do tend to pull that little circuit breaker in the back over here, and then that vibrator stops and it gets a little bit more quiet in the cockpit, and that annoying sound goes away. That is strictly forbidden. If any pilot would be to do that, they would absolutely get a meeting, because you are absolutely not allowed to pull a circuit breaker for literally no reason. After all, that needle has been installed in the plane for a reason, or that vibrator. Now, if you're wondering why I know where that breaker is located, let me say that way. Part of the safety inspection is to check the circuit breakers, and I cannot say that I've never boarded an airplane where a previous crew had pulled that CB. Now, that is one of the two circuit breakers that is going to get you a meeting, and one of the only two circuit breakers that a pilot would touch. Now, the other one is just next to it, that is the voice recorder circuit breaker. Now, if you evacuate the airplane, you will see that battery off is not among the items of the evacuation checklist. In fact, you leave the battery on because you need the emergency lights to operate. But that in turn means that the cockpit voice recorder is going to continue to run. And you don't want that. You are legally required to preserve the recording of any incident that led to a passenger evacuation. Therefore, you need to pull the circuit breaker of the cockpit voice recorder and thereby preserve the recording when you evacuate the airplane. It's only when there's really immediate life-threatening danger, where you really need to get out immediately, that you can ignore this and just get out the airplane straight away. Otherwise, you're required to pull that circuit breaker down here. Now, those are the only two circuit breakers in the 737 that pilots would touch. Apart from that, there is another two in one non-normal checklist, but to my knowledge, these have never actually been pulled in actual operation of the airplane. And that is the circuit breakers for the stick shaker in case of an airspeed unreliable event that would cause the low speed indication on one side of the displays, and that might require you to pull the circuit breaker for the associated stick shaker in order to silence that warning. But to my knowledge, that has never actually been used in actual Boeing 737 operation. So, what is my history with actual circuit breakers popping in airliners then? Well, I already told you about the only one I needed to put in, and that is the standby altimeter one. I never had to evacuate, luckily, so the voice recorder CB, we always brief it that we pull it in case we run out, but I never actually had to. So the standby altimeter vibrator, pushing that in, is the only CB that I've ever had to use under my operation. Now, I did have a couple times though where maintenance needed to pull a circuit breaker. Now, when we talk about that, basically there is two situations in which I had this happen. One of them was when the external power dropped out, then occasionally a circuit breaker might pop. However, that happens, pilots are absolutely not allowed to reset any circuit breakers while the airplane is on the ground. You need to call maintenance. Now, there are some rare occasions where maintenance might instruct you to pull a circuit breaker, but again, you only do that under maintenance instruction, or they are going to come out and do it themselves. Now, I've had, I believe, one occasion where we needed to do that, and that was after, again, such a power drop, where the pre-recorded announcement machine, or the pram, went out. Now the pram in the 737, it would be located just up here, and that is where the cabin crew are going to play things like pre-recorded safety demonstrations. So that is one device that is rather prone to power cuts, and when that happens, the maintenance is going to come out. They are going to find the pram up here in the entertainment circuit breakers. Now, I don't believe the PMDG actually has a pram CB, because it doesn't have a pram installed. So generally, when maintenance has to do that, they come in, pull the breaker, wait a minute, push it back in, and then the entire thing works again. So that is pretty much the only circuit breaker I ever experienced popping in the 737. Now, there is one more thing you can do when you are really fed up with work and you really want to go home and you can't stand the airline. That is this. Take a hydraulic pump, and that's gonna pop the CB of the hydraulic pump, but that CB is located down in the E&E bay, so you would actually have to have an engineer to go in there and pull that one. So again, you can see that is not a CB that would affect actual operation or anything that the pilots have to do with the actual operation. That is all maintenance stuff that these circuit breaker stories are related to. Now, therefore, in terms of what is simulated in flight simulation, since it's definitely a flight simulator, not a maintenance simulator, I tend to say it's fair that circuit breakers are actually not simulated in there. Now, personally, I would like that standby altimeter vibrator CB to be simulated, but the only change you're going to have is that that annoying sound stops, and the needle would get a little bit sticky and a little bit jumpy, but apart from that, it doesn't affect your operation. Other than that, you're illegal to fly. So, that much about my time on the 737. Now, let's move on then to the A330. And the simple matter of truth is, in the A330 cockpit, there are no circuit breakers. There simply are no circuit breakers in there at all anymore, because pilots are not meant to touch them. Therefore, all circuit breakers that exist on the A330 are either located in the galleys. So, for example, the circuit breakers for the ovens or for the air chillers and stuff like that, that the cabin crew got in the galleys, that stuff has circuit breakers that are accessible within the cabin. But again, not for the pilot, and the cabin crew isn't meant to touch them either. They are literally just located there for ease of access for the engineers. And the other location of circuit breakers in the A330 is down in the E&E compartment. So any of the CBs that you got in that plane that affect things like the systems and that are not cabin stuff, any of those CBs are located downstairs in the avionics compartment, because pilots don't need to access them. Easy as that. Now, the A320 is a little bit different. It does have circuit breakers in the cockpit, but there is a good reason for that. The A330, while it doesn't have circuit breakers, I'm sure some of you have been thinking of this by now, it does have these switches on the aft overhead panel which kinda look a bit like circuit breakers, but they aren't. those switches are actually system reset switches. So if you've got a certain system that fails, and if that system can be reset, then you can press these switches, or rather you can pull them out in a similar fashion to a circuit breaker, but all it does is an ordinary shutdown of the system. It's not a circuit breaker. And then 2 seconds later you push it back in, and then the system reboots. So like that, you've got computer reset switches in the A330 cockpit. Now, this is also the reason why on the A330 you got a dedicated eCam page related to circuit breakers, because you can't see if any is popped in the cockpit. But if a circuit breaker actually pops, then you're going to get an eCam caution saying ELAC CB, and then you go onto that eCam page, or it will open automatically anyway, and then you can see which circuit breaker is popped. Now, I've had a couple cases where there have been circuit breakers pulled by maintenance as part of MEL items that couldn't be fixed immediately, but that had to be deferred to the next longer stop of the airplane. And in those cases, on some occasions, there were circuit breakers pulled. For example, I've had the circuit breaker of the printer in the A330 pulled because the printer was inoperative. So then on the LXCB page, you are going to get the indication that the CB of the printer is pulled. But again, the pilot cannot do that himself, and as a pilot you are not allowed to reset those breakers. Now, the general philosophy on resetting circuit breakers in flight depends per airline, and any airline that I've flown for so far, and any airline that I actually know about, does typically not allow the reset of a circuit breaker unless the captain deems it necessary for the safety of the flight. Now, that is the cryptic way of saying you're not allowed to reset a circuit breaker unless the plane is falling apart underneath you. In other words, you're not allowed to reset it. And that is for a good reason. You always need to remember circuit breakers pop for a reason. Let's say, for example, you've got an oven and that circuit breaker pops. Chances are the breaker popped to prevent a fire from breaking out. So resetting that circuit breaker, of course, in some cases might work. There have been many cases where we said, no, we aren't going to reset something, and then the engineer came aboard after landing and reset it. Now, I'm saying many cases, that's been 2 cases of the pram, and that's it. But that is many cases, because that's just how safe aircraft are. Now, in general, getting back to the topic of Flight Simulator, the reason I'm doing this video is because I do feel it is necessary to shed a little bit of light into how important circuit breakers actually are for aviation. Obviously, for the safety aspect, they are very important, but for the actual operational aspects, they are pretty much irrelevant. As a pilot, you don't have anything to do with them other than to call maintenance in case one of them pops. And even that basically doesn't really happen. So, that's going to be it for today's video. I do hope you found this one interesting. Now ask yourself, and do put in the comments below, how often in any of those add-ons which does have simulated circuit breakers did you actually touch one of those breakers? And how often did you have any of them popped? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you think about the content of this video and what you think about the story, and I'm very much looking forward to your feedback. Now, if you did like the video, be sure to leave a like on YouTube, as it does really help out the channel. Subscribe if you're up for more, and if you really like what I'm doing on this channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me a Coffee link that you can find in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and I see you all again on the next one.